They manipulate their currencies like nobody can even believe, which is a bad, bad thing and very devastating to us.
Let's start with something that some people still don't realize. The fall of the dollar right now isn't a mistake. It's part of the plan. Trump's advisors have correctly diagnosed a real, serious problem. The global economy has been running on an imbalance for decades. Countries like China, Germany, Japan, and others have built massive production capacities, producing much more than they consume, creating a persistent overflow of goods and capital. China, for example, floods the world with artificially cheap products, often boosted by hidden subsidies, predatory industrial policies, and strategic currency manipulation designed to trap other economies into dependency and weaken their own industries, many times sacrificing the well-being of its own people through suppressed wages, poor working conditions, and even forced labor, especially among minorities, all in pursuit of geopolitical power rather than natural competitiveness. But why does this matter to the US? Well, when these countries overproduce, they need someone else to buy the excess, and that someone is usually America. The US has become the buyer of last resort because its economy is large, open, structured to favor consumption over savings, and because it is often cheaper for Americans to import those goods than to produce them domestically. Americans spend more than they produce, running persistent trade deficits. In return, countries like China, overflowing with savings, send their excess to the US, buying American debt, real estate, and other assets. By American debt, I mean mostly US Treasury bonds, where countries lend money to the US government and get paid interest over time. You might wonder why countries would send their excess savings to the US instead of using them to invest and grow inside their own economies. The answer lies in trust, liquidity, and safety. The US has the largest, most stable financial markets in the world, making it the safest place to park large amounts of money. When surplus countries accumulate excess savings, they need somewhere reliable to invest them, and US Treasury bonds and other American assets offer security, legal protections, and global liquidity that no other country can match. It might sound crazy at first to sell them products and then give them the earnings too, but for them, it's safer and more practical to invest their overflow into the US economy than risk instability at home. This constant inflow of cheap foreign money keeps the dollar strong, but that strength has a hidden cost. It erodes America's industrial core and deepens the economic imbalance Trump is trying to fix. It creates a dangerous illusion. Global demand for US assets strengthens the dollar, but that very strength makes American exports less competitive abroad. As exports struggle, factories close, communities that once thrived around manufacturing collapse. Workers don't just lose jobs, they lose the foundations of their lives, watching decades of prosperity disappear almost overnight, while foreign goods flood the US market and deepen the wound. The US gets the short-term benefit of easy money and cheap imports, but the long-term price? Huge. This is the hidden cost of the global imbalance Trump's team identified: shrinking industrial base, higher debt, and growing vulnerability.
Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. And ultimately, more production at home will mean stronger competition and lower prices for consumers. This will be indeed the golden age of America. It's coming back. We're going to come back very strongly.
Trump's team correctly sees this as a strategic threat. Not just an economic problem, but a national security problem. Some experts are warning that this could be increasing the likelihood of a depression in 2025. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next video, where we'll break it down in detail. Without a strong industrial base, the US becomes weaker militarily, technologically, and economically. Their solution? A weaker dollar would, in theory, make American exports more competitive, revive US industry, and rebalance trade. This strategy isn't new. In 1985, a similar tactic was used under the Plaza Accord, where major economies agreed to drive down the dollar to help US manufacturing. Trump's team wants a modern version of that playbook. So, yes, the devaluation is intentional, and they are partially succeeding, but the plan is incomplete and dangerously exposed. First, simply weakening the dollar won't fix the structural issues that cause the imbalance in the first place. The problem isn't just currency levels, it's the entire economic model of countries like China, which has weaponized its manufacturing power to gain strategic leverage over other economies. Yet this aggressive strategy is also a ticking time bomb. Without the US buying their goods, China's economy risks collapsing under its own weight. This vulnerability is part of why the dollar, despite weakening recently against major currencies like the euro and the yen, has not weakened against the most strategically important rival, the Chinese yuan. This is a problem so deeply rooted that even starting to solve it could take decades. Second, the method of forcing this devaluation is risky. Instead of quietly coordinating with allies like in 1985, Trump's approach has been to aggressively impose tariffs, escalate trade tensions, and threaten everyone simultaneously. This shoot first, negotiate later strategy has created massive instability, undermining trust in US leadership. Recently, when Trump intensified his tariff threats, something unusual happened. Investors started selling US bonds instead of flocking to them for safety. In normal crises, people run to US bonds for security. This time, they backed away. That's a terrifying sign that global confidence in the US as the safe haven of the world is cracking. If that trust collapses, the dollar could not only lose value but also lose its status as the world's reserve currency. A disaster for the US economy that would trigger inflation, higher interest rates, and a sharp decline in living standards not only for America, but for countries around the world. And here's the irony. Trump doesn't want to lose the dollar's reserve status. He wants the benefits of a weaker dollar without giving up the privileges that come from issuing the world's most powerful currency. But the brutal reality is, you can't have both. You can't aggressively devalue the dollar, threaten global trade relationships, weaponize tariffs against allies, and still expect the world to keep trusting the dollar without question. Instead of building a broad coalition, meaning forming alliances with other major economies like the United Kingdom and Canada, who also suffer from global trade imbalances, to pressure surplus countries to reform, the US under Trump is acting alone, burning bridges and accelerating global distrust. Meanwhile, China is playing the long game, increasing its gold reserves, diversifying trade away from the dollar, and preparing for a world where the US isn't the center of gravity anymore. The plan to rebalance the global economy through a weaker dollar could work if executed with patience, alliances, and precision instead of a high-risk gamble, taken in a moment of global instability where every misstep could accelerate America's decline, not its resurgence. The dollar's fall was part of the plan, but the collapse of trust? That wasn't. And that's the price we're all starting to pay. Things are only just beginning. Subscribe to the channel to stay tuned, and as always, stay curious and stay hodling.